At a bridal shower, I overheard my future daughter-in-law say, "Once we're married, I'll make sure she's out of our lives for good." My son smirked, "She won't even see it coming." I acted clueless, smiling and gifting them a generous wedding check. But when they tried to cash it, they found out what I had really done. I had always dreamed of the day my son would find someone he loved and start a family of his own. As a single mother, I worked 2 jobs to make sure he had every opportunity in life. I thought we were close. I thought we had that special bond. But I learned the hard way that people change when money and power get involved. I found out the truth at his bridal shower. The conversation that changed everything. The shower was at a fancy country club, thrown by the bride's family. I showed up with a smile, a generous check tucked into my purse as a wedding gift. I wasn't rich, but I had saved for years to help my son and his future wife start their new life. I figured they could use it for a down payment on a house or something meaningful. Then, I walked past the restroom on my way back from the buffet and heard my son's voice. "She won't even see it coming," he laughed. I froze. He was talking to his fiancée, my future daughter-in-law. My heart pounded as I realized they were talking about me. "Once we're married," she said, her voice dripping with contempt, "I'll make sure she's out of our lives for good. No more unannounced visits, no more calls. I don't want her anywhere near our kids." "Don't worry," my son said. "She still thinks I'm her little boy. She'll hand over the check, and once the money clears, we'll go no contact." It's almost too easy. They both laughed. I had to grip the table for support. The room spun. My son, the child I raised, the person I sacrificed everything for, was planning to take my money and cut me out of his life like I was nothing. But I didn't react. I didn't storm in and confront them. I took a deep breath, plastered a smile on my face, and walked back to my seat. I handed them the wedding card, same as everyone else, but when they tried to cash it later, that's when they realized what I had done. How I turned the tables. I had a choice. I could cry. I could beg. Or I could play along and make sure they got what they deserved. At the end of the shower, I went up to my son and his fiancée. I beamed at them, handed over the card with the check inside, and said, "I'm so proud of you both. I know you'll do great things together." They bought the act. They took the card without hesitation. Not once did they think I'd heard them. But here's the thing, that check? It wasn't real. Well, it was technically. It was a valid check, written from a specific bank account. But that account? It was my deceased father's estate account, one that had long been closed. The bank wouldn't clear it no matter what. To make it even sweeter, I made the check out for $40,000. A ridiculous amount that I knew they'd never question, just greedily accept. The fallout 2 weeks later, I got a furious phone call from my son. "Mom, the check bounced," he shouted. "Oh," I said sweetly. "That's strange. Let me check with the bank." I let him stew for a day before calling back. I talked to the bank. It looks like there was an issue with the account. It's no longer active. "I'm so sorry." "But don't worry, I'll try to sort it out after the wedding." Cue silence. He realized exactly what that meant. See, the wedding was in 4 days. They had already spent money assuming they had that $40,000. The venue, catering, the dress, it was all booked under the assumption they'd be able to use my gift. And now? Now they were in deep financial trouble. Suddenly, I wasn't just the annoying mom they were planning to cut out. Now, I was the lifeline they desperately needed. Begging won't work now. The next day, my son and his fiancée showed up at my house. I opened the door and saw them standing there, looking stressed and embarrassed. I crossed my arms. "We need to talk," my son said. "Oh, about what?" I asked, all innocent. His fiancée jumped in, her voice all fake sweetness. "We just wanted to make sure everything was okay. We wouldn't want you to feel left out of the wedding." I let them ramble for a bit before I tilted my head and said, "So, when exactly were you planning on cutting me out of your lives? Before or after the honeymoon?" My son's face went white. His fiancée's jaw dropped. What are you talking about?" my son stammered. "I heard you at the bridal shower," I said calmly. "You know, when you said I wouldn't see it coming. Funny how that worked out." His fiancée looked like she wanted to disappear. "Mom, it's not like that." "Oh, it's exactly like that," I said. "And you know what? I was going to actually give you real money. But now, you'll get nothing from me. And if you ever try to contact me again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you tried to do." I watched as reality hit them. The wedding was 3 days away. The deposits had been paid, but they still owed vendors thousands. They couldn't afford it. I shut the door in their faces. The wedding disaster. The wedding did happen, but it wasn't the lavish event they had planned. They had to downsize everything, cheaper flowers, a smaller venue, a knockoff wedding dress. I heard the groom's family had to pitch in last minute, but it wasn't enough. Guests whispered about how weirdly rushed everything seemed. A month after the wedding, my son called again. This time, it wasn't to yell. It was to beg. "Mom, I'm sorry. We messed up. Can we talk? I blocked his number. Sometimes, the best revenge is letting people deal with the consequences of their own greed. The consequences of greed after I blocked my son, I thought that was it. That they'd just struggle on their own, that they'd realize their mistake and move on. But I underestimated how far desperate people would go, because a few weeks later I got served. They sued me. I almost laughed when I saw the papers. My own son and his new wife were suing me for fraud. Their claim? That I had promised them $40,000 and, intentionally, gave them a fake check to cause them financial harm. They wanted me to pay actual damages for emotional distress and financial ruin. I sat at my kitchen table, rereading the paperwork, shaking my head. They really thought they could force me to give them money. I needed a lawyer. Enter my attorney, and my secret weapon. Luckily, I had a friend, let's call him Paul, who was an attorney. Not just any attorney, but a brilliant, cutthroat one who had spent years dealing with fraud cases. I called him up and told him everything. When I finished, he just whistled. So let me get this straight, your son, the one you raised, planned to steal from you, and now he's mad because you beat him at his own game? That's right. And he thinks a judge is going to be on his side? Apparently. Paul chuckled. This is going to be fun. He took the case immediately. Destroying their case before it even began. First, Paul had me dig through old texts, emails, any proof that my son had never actually asked for the money, that I had never promised it outright. And guess what? I found a message from months ago where my son had said, "I don't want your money, Mom. I don't need your help anymore." Beautiful. Then Paul had me request their financial records. Because if they were claiming I had ruined them, we needed to see exactly how. And oh, did we find some dirt? Turns out, they hadn't just been planning to cut me off. They had been bleeding money for months. Credit card debt. Personal loans. A $15,000 wedding dress that was still sitting in a boutique because they couldn't afford to pick it up. And the best part? They had tried to cash the check before the wedding and spent money they didn't have, assuming it would clear. In short, they weren't ruined because of me. They were ruined because of their own stupidity. The courtroom showdown. By the time we got to court, my son and his wife looked awful. Stress, unpaid bills, and desperation had aged them in just a few weeks. Meanwhile, I walked in calm, collected, and ready. Paul stood up first. Your Honor, the plaintiffs claim financial harm due to a check that was never guaranteed. But here's what really happened. And then he laid everything out. The overheard conversation. The planned betrayal. The failed check. The irresponsible spending. Then, the cherry on top, he played my son's own text message for the courtroom. I don't want your money, Mom. I don't need your help anymore. Silence. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. Then he turned to my son and his wife. You based your entire lawsuit on the idea that you were owed money. But from what I see here, you were never promised a dime. You assumed. You spent recklessly. And now you're trying to blame your mother for your own actions. Case dismissed. But it wasn't over yet. I thought that would be the last of it. That after being humiliated in court, my son and his wife would finally back off. I was wrong. Because that night, my car tires were slashed. My house was egged. And I got a message from a blocked number that said, "You'll regret this." I reported everything to the police, but there wasn't much they could do without proof. That's when I realized, this wasn't just about money anymore. This was war. The twist I didn't see coming: the next morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I picked up, a woman's voice said, "You don't know me, but I know your daughter-in-law. And you need to hear what I have to say." I gripped my phone. Who is this? Let's just say, I used to be in your position. And trust me, you're not the first person she's tried to scam. My stomach dropped. Meet me at the diner on 8th Street. I have proof. And just like that, everything got even darker. I sat in my car outside the little diner on 8th Street, my fingers gripping the steering wheel. The woman who called me had sounded serious, almost urgent. My gut told me this wasn't just about my son's wife being greedy. This was something bigger. I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse, and stepped inside. The place was nearly empty except for a woman sitting in a corner booth, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. She looked up when she saw me, eyes scanning my face like she was trying to confirm I was who she thought I was. "You must be her mother-in-law," she said. I sat across from her, my heart pounding. "And you are?" She sighed. "My name is Danielle. And I used to be engaged to your son's wife." My blood ran cold. Engaged? Yeah. Until she ran off with my savings, destroyed my credit, and left me in debt so deep I almost had to declare bankruptcy. I stared at her, my mind racing. I had known my son's wife was manipulative. But this? This was something else entirely. Tell me everything. A history of deception. Danielle took a deep breath and started talking. She and my daughter-in-law, let's call her Madison, had been together for 2 years. They met at a college networking event. Danielle had been working in finance, making good money, and Madison had been, well, Madison. Charming, beautiful, always knowing the right things to say. She was perfect. Too perfect, Danielle muttered, shaking her head. I was head over heels. She made me feel like we were going to have this amazing life together. She said she wanted to start a business, and I believed her. So when she needed money for investments or startup costs, I gave it to her. Thousands. How much? I asked, my voice low. She hesitated. Around $80,000. I nearly choked on my own breath. And let me guess, there was no business. Danielle let out a bitter laugh. Nope. The business was her going on vacations, buying designer bags, and oh yeah, dating other people behind my back. My stomach twisted. I only found out after I saw charges on our shared credit card that didn't make sense. Flights I didn't take, hotel stays in cities I'd never been to. When I confronted her, she gaslit me. Said I was paranoid. That I didn't trust her enough. That sounded exactly like something Madison would say. So what happened? I finally wised up and kicked her out. But by then, my savings were drained, my credit was trashed, and I was in therapy trying to figure out how the hell I got played so hard. I shook my head. And now she's doing it again with my son. Danielle leaned forward, her expression dark. You need to get him away from her. Because she won't stop until she's taken everything. The realization that hit me like a train. I sat there, reeling from what I had just heard. My son wasn't just married to a greedy woman. He was married to a professional scammer. But here was the part that sent a chill down my spine. If Madison had done this to Danielle, it meant she already knew how to cover her tracks. And if she knew how to cover her tracks, then maybe this whole lawsuit wasn't just about getting money. Maybe it was about silencing me. Because I had done something that no one else had. I caught her. A plan unfolds, Danielle, I said slowly. Do you have proof? Emails? Texts? Anything? She nodded. I still have everything. I even tried to take her to court once, but she had already drained my money, and I couldn't afford the legal fees. She got away with it. I pulled out my phone. Not this time. I called Paul, my attorney. We have a problem, I said the moment he picked up. What now? Madison has done this before. And I have someone who can prove it. Paul was silent for a beat. Then he said, meet me at my office tomorrow. We're going to make sure she never does it again. The trap I set. By the time I got home, my mind was spinning with possibilities. If Madison had scammed one person before, how many others had there been? I started digging. I looked up Madison's legal records. Nothing at first. But then, buried in old court filings, I found a lawsuit against her from 4 years ago. Some financial company had sued her for unpaid loans. Then I checked social media. Madison had wiped most of her past, but I found old photos, ones she probably thought no one would ever see. Photos of her with different men and women, all from different cities, all looking like they were deeply in love. And the final piece? An anonymous forum post from a woman in another state, warning people about a woman who sounded exactly like Madison. I screenshot everything. Then I sent a text to my son. We need to talk. I know what Madison has done. And if you don't listen to me this time, I won't be the only one you'll regret crossing. The text that changed everything. At first, there was no response. Hours passed, then a full day. But late that night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my son. Meet me at our old coffee shop tomorrow. Alone. Alone. That word made me uneasy. But I had come too far to stop now. I just had no idea that the person who showed up wasn't my son. It was Madison. And she wasn't smiling anymore. The reckoning. I walked into the coffee shop expecting my son. Instead, I got her. Madison was already seated at a corner table, back straight, fingers curled around a cappuccino she probably had no intention of drinking. Her perfect little mask was still in place, impeccable makeup, soft curls framing her face, but her eyes were dead. She didn't smile, didn't offer a fake greeting. She just stared at me, her expression as cold as the coffee I suddenly didn't want anymore. Where's my son? I asked, keeping my voice even. She tilted her head slightly, then shrugged. He's not coming. I didn't sit. So this is how you want to play it? I asked. You knew I was coming here to talk to him. And you intercepted me instead? Intercepted? She let out a small laugh. No, sweetheart. I'm here to warn you. The sheer audacity of her made my blood boil. Warn me? Yes. She took a slow sip of her coffee, as if we were two old friends catching up. You're making a mistake. You don't want to push this any further. I sat down, not because I was intimidated, but because I wanted her to see exactly what she was dealing with. Oh, Madison, I said, leaning in. I know everything. For the first time, I saw her jaw tighten. Everything? Danielle told me all about you. I found the lawsuits. The unpaid debts. The forum posts warning people about you. And if you don't back off, I'll make sure my son knows exactly who he married. Her nostrils flared, but she kept her tone even. And then what? You think he'll leave me? You think he'll believe you over me? I think he'll have a hard time explaining why his wife has a trail of broken lives behind her. That finally got to her. She set down her cup a little too hard, eyes darkening. Listen to me, you bitter old hag, I raised a finger. Watch the tone, sweetheart. You're supposed to be the sweet, loving wife. Remember? She took a slow breath, collecting herself. Then, she smiled. A fake, plastic, terrifying smile. Fine, she said. Let's cut to the chase. What do you want? I want you out of my son's life. She laughed. Actually laughed. That's not happening. Then I'll ruin you. Her smile faded. You already tried. You failed. My name is on everything. The house, the accounts. If you think my husband will choose you over his wife, you clearly don't know him anymore. And that hit a nerve. Because she was right. I had spent so many years believing I knew my son. That no matter what happened, we'd always be close. But that wasn't true anymore. I wasn't his priority. She was. And she had no intention of letting go. You want a war? She whispered. Fine. But just know, I play dirty. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and looked down at her. Then you should have done your homework, sweetheart. Because so do I. And I walked out. The confrontation, in front of everyone. I didn't go home. I went straight to my son's house. If he wasn't going to meet me at the coffee shop, then he was damn well going to hear me out in his own living room. I banged on the door. Hard. After a few moments, it swung open, and there he was, my son. Looking exhausted, annoyed, and, worst of all, defensive. Mom, what the hell, sit down. I pushed past him and walked into the house. He followed, rubbing his temples. Look, if this is about the lawsuit, no, this is about your wife. And how she's been conning people for years. He blinked. Then he laughed. Oh my God. Are you serious? This again? Yes, this again. And if you don't believe me, then explain this. I pulled out my phone and shoved it in his face. Danielle's messages. The old court documents. The forum posts. Everything. I watched as his face changed. At first, he looked annoyed. Then confused. Then, something else. Something dangerous. Where did you get these? It doesn't matter. What matters is that this is who you married. And you need to wake up before she drains you dry. That's ridiculous, he scoffed, but there was hesitation in his voice now. Is it? Then why did she meet me instead of you? Why did she warn me not to push this? If she's so innocent, why does she have a history of disappearing after ruining people? He swallowed hard. He wanted to deny it. Wanted to call me crazy. But deep down, something wasn't sitting right with him anymore. Then, before he could say another word, the door opened. And Madison walked in. The moment everything fell apart, she took one look at us and froze. What's going on? She asked, her voice all soft concern. I crossed my arms. I just showed your husband everything. Her face barely flickered. But her hands? They clenched. Everything, she repeated. My son turned to her, jaw tight. Tell me it's not true. She blinked. Tell you it's not true? That you scammed people. That you used them for money. That you planned to cut my mother out the second she gave us a check. Oh my God, is that what she told you? Madison let out a forced, incredulous laugh. She's lying, babe. She's been trying to ruin our marriage from the start. But my son wasn't buying it anymore. Then why is there a legal record of you being sued? Madison froze. Just for a second. Then, she did what all scammers do when they're cornered. She turned vicious. Oh, grow up, she snapped. So I had exes. So what? That doesn't mean I scammed anyone. Maybe your mom should mind her own damn business instead of trying to control your life. My son stared at her. Really stared at her. Then he said, did you ever even love me? And that was it. That was the question she couldn't answer. Because the truth? The real truth? Madison had never loved anyone. Not me. Not Danielle. Not my son. Just money. Just control. And he finally saw it. The fallout he left her. The divorce was messy. Public. Humiliating. Madison tried to take everything, but Paul made sure she got nothing. And me? I thought I'd feel victorious. But in the end, all I felt was empty. Because I had gotten my revenge. I had exposed the truth. But I had also lost my son. Not forever. But long enough that it hurt. And as I watched him rebuild his life, I knew one thing for certain. I would never let anyone fool me again.